Good morning, everybody. A warm thank you from me also to everybody who has helped Annika and the team to organize this. My name is Lena, like Ture said, and I come from Finland, representing HUR. A couple of words about Finland. Did you know that according to the happiness report this year, Finland is the happiest country in the world? And especially when I came here, I was thinking about this, that how could that be possible? Gloomy Finns living in a cold country where it's dark many hours during the day, most of the time. But the saying that happiness equals reality minus expectations might explain a little bit why Finland has so high scores on happiness. Another thing in the report which was very important, a predominant factor in the report is the expectation of a healthy life. So not just living long, but staying healthy and being able to be active. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So I will leave over to Ture and Jenny, and they will tell you a lot more about how we can stay active and how we can stay happy. So thank you from my side.
Thank you, Lena. And again, it's wonderful to have Lena here. I met her, I got lucky, I was in Finland for a moment in the Happy Nation and met Lena before, then it was in the middle of winter without snow, really awkward. So this is a great chance to catch up again. Next one, we're going to have a few words from Republic Polytechnic, who's kindly. So we're going to have then Edward coming up. If you can come and say a few words. And again, big thank you for you guys for allowing us to be here in your beautiful facility.
Our pleasure. Right, thank you, Lena, for the opening as well. Right, so first and foremost, I'd like to welcome everyone. I think we are amongst the converts. We are here, okay, people from the SSAs, community care services, our friends from SIT, Dr. Sean, our friends from Australia, Annika, okay, we've been a long-term friend and contact. Alright, so I think between countries, Finland, Australia, Singapore, I think we are no strangers to one another. The world is very connected these days. I think our relationship goes back in time very many years ago. I think many of you, some of you here might even have gone to Finland yourselves, right, to be trained. And coincidentally, I have a colleague who is now just attended her graduation ceremony from the University of Jakarta, if I got it correct, right, her PhD. Yeah, so it's just finished. Pardon my pronunciation, right? So I think this ongoing partnership and collaboration is something that is very unique. I hope that we can collaborate more instead of compete, even amongst different SSAs. I think we should seek to collaborate more, rather than compete, right? I know competition is healthy, but not at the expense of our seniors. I think for the Singaporeans over here, local, I think you would have known of Healthier SG. Right, I will not bore you with the stats. You probably have seen more than enough of the statistics on why we are embarking on this particular movement in Healthier SG. But what we are doing here today is really to reinforce what we are doing, the good work, and continue to actually upskill ourselves, continue to keep ourselves connected through our international speakers who have flown all the way here to Singapore. I think there's a lot to learn and a lot to network among one another. I think that's the value of coming together in a physical seminar or conference where we can just get to know one another in person. Let this session be a bit more personal, casual, okay? It's not something that you just hear from the top and then on the ground, then we just let it pass. More importantly is to take action wherever you are and to really bring back these teaching and learning points and implement it in your own centers wherever you are, so that the seniors, the people that come to your centers can benefit from these very innovating and also evidence-based, more importantly, right, programs. Right. So without further ado, I wish you a very successful seminar today, and hope that we get to know one another more through the talks, the tea breaks, and all the activities that's been scheduled. So thank you very much, and welcome to the RP once again.
Thank you so much. I'll tell you a secret. both Tommy and I did with our physio degrees in Jyväskylä, in the same school with the same lecturers. I just did a few years earlier, you know. Tommy was one of the, I think maybe different decade or something like that. But anyway, same township, and it's a great sports uni. It's a really, really good place. You should go visit. Let me know when you go. All right, so next we're going to have a few words from Dr. Sean there from Singapore Institute of Technology. So Sean, I'll welcome you. And your slides, I'll come and show you.
Thanks, Shuri.
Oh, yes, you can have the mic.
Thanks, Shuri. If we can just a quick appreciation to HUR's solution for organizing this. I think it's a wonderful opportunity that we can come together, definitely to Republic Poly, to be hosting this session at this place. I think this is a wonderful venue. In fact, this is my first time at this lecture theatre. So I think it's very wonderful to have actually this opportunity to actually engage everybody. I think in Singapore, we are moving in a very super age society, everybody all knows. And having to see all of us here, I think we are all here to learn, not only about the best practice in Singapore, but as well as international. So for Sunbeam, I think Sunbeam is an evidence-based practice, and something we have to, I think, pick up the strength and see how we can try to see what we can be doing in Singapore as well. I just wanted to just cover two topics very quickly because I've been focusing on this aspect of falls efficacy over the last 4 years under my PhD. Because in terms of falls prevention, we've always been looking at strength and we've always been looking at balance. But I think it's important to understand what the seniors are feeling, what the seniors are thinking. How confident are they to prevent falls and manage falls? So in my PhD work, I was looking at 4 stages: the pre-fall, the near fall, fall landing, and completed fall. As much as seniors, you always want to help them to prevent falls. But the reality is there's also the risk that they can actually have a fall, and how can we help them to manage if it does occur as well. So importantly, I think looking at Sunbeam evidence, I think it's quite exciting. They can reduce the risk and also help to improve the strength, the balance, the physical capacity. So I really want to see how we can work together as well as our clinical providers here to see how can we build the confidence of managed falls. So moving forward, the next slide very quickly is moving through the spectrum of falls prevention and management. There are different kinds of measurement instruments as well as interventions. And what we're going to see here will be a very exciting program like what Sunbeam has been doing and see how we can work together and see how we can help our seniors in Singapore. That's very quickly a bit of what I wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Now this is really great, and I like the fact when everybody's saying that we're preaching to the converted. That means it's a really good room, because it's a room of people who understand the importance and they understand the tools, and it's also a room of people where it's understood that we need to make a change, that we actually have to do something. So thus I'm going to start my own talk. Just talking about why exercise therapy is essential, and obviously I will be focusing more on strength training and sarcopenia. And I don't know if any of you looked at this year, but this year, according to the American College of Sports Medicine, is the year, the main topic for fitness industry is the exercise for older adults. So they did a survey all around the world and they asked different people, and this is the key topic at the moment. And one of the reasons is that people start understanding why we need to do exercise and why it's important. And obviously falls cost a lot of money, but it's way beyond falls. And in reality, we talk about people from the 40s. So we're talking about middle ages. And I have a pet hate I have many pet hates, but one of them is if you go to a seminar and you talk, people bring their parents and you talk about exercise for the parents, and then the daughter or son who is 55, you said, okay, what do you do for exercise? Oh, no, not me yet. Oh, no. And it's like, hello, you're 55. Yeah. You should consider this. Don't leave it to the last minute. So it's really, really important trying to get the message out, even to young people. It's not just about yoga. Yeah, yoga is good, and I will have a slide about this, so you'll get to know what I'm really talking about. But really understand the benefit of gyms, and I think I have a classic story. Is my husband's relative got diagnosed with early onset dementia at 55. And now he's 65, quite advanced, and he's now in an aged care home. But when he was 55, and I remember saying to the wife then that, just with my advice, whatever you do, maybe you should go to the gym and do some strength training. And then she said, oh yeah, we put on a bit of weight. And I was like, this is nothing to do with your weight. This is to do with his cognition. This is to do with dementia. I don't care about it. You could weigh 250 kilos, all I care about. I care about his brain, not his level of, or not his weight. It doesn't interest me. But trying to get over this whole thing that strength training is only about going to the gym and posing in front of a TV or going with the influencers. It's nothing to do with influencers. Let them influence. Look, I must admit, I have times at the gym where I don't go there. That's when the girls with the fake lashes and the bum training is gone. I don't go there because I die. It's like, oh my God, I can't be here. I have to go. And then they're, are you training yet? So I go there when no one else is there. I go in the nana time, so really, really late at night. But that's really what I'm going to be talking about. So this is nearly 10 years ago now. So World Health Organization said already 2015 that healthy aging is the process of developing and maintaining the functional ability that enables well-being in older age. And that's the whole goal. I mean, we want to stay well so that we can do what we want to do. It's sort of like health. If you're healthy, you can do exactly what you want, not you're capable of doing, not something that someone tells that you have limitations for. And that's why really it's important to talk about this topic and talk about exercise. And this is, and again, from this year, beautiful slides. Like they're all in my LinkedIn, and well, it's her Australia's LinkedIn because I run it anyway. So, great graphics. If you need to brainwash people for great things, this year is for the graphics. I'll have many of these things in my slides from this year. Some that I made my own, and this is from one article. I love this one. So this was in January 2023. In the Exercise, Sports and Movement Science magazine, and just about the health of adaptations after exercise, and divided in 3 different things. So you have resistance training and aerobic training, and then you have the adaptations to both of them, adaptations to resistance training and adaptations to aerobic training. And then you have the combinations. Most of them are the combinations, so the nice green circles there. Obviously cardiorespiratory function, you have to do cardio to do that. But also, if you want to do the 2 triangles, which you get in decline of muscle mass and also muscle strength, you can only get them by doing strength training. And then if you look at sarcopenia, we know from research that sarcopenia is all about these 2, but furthermore, we know that power goes way beyond both of those. So power means muscle power is about you climbing upstairs and climbing downstairs and everything else. That goes way beyond muscle mass. So by the time you can see the muscles mass gone, it's almost too late already. So that's why it's really important that we do all things. And it's these things that then, those together, then we talk about glucose homeostasis, mobility, and mitochondrial function. They're affected by both. But these are the things that we're going to do, because we want to get to the cell level and try to do exactly what we need to get done. Because that's how we get the effect of the chronic diseases. Because we've all heard about the exercise is medicine phrasing. Exercise really is the medicine. I don't have enough time, but I have another slide sort of about all the health implications, what we do. But it's important to understand that all your cell builders are based on protein. Protein is stored in your muscles. The bigger your muscles are, the more protein you have, therefore you have more material. That's your construction stuff. That's your, we have tiles, and if we build a house, we need materials to build houses. This is where you build your health. It's the cells, it's the protein that allows you to build your health. So this is then, I'll come back to this one. So there's a nice image. What does it look like when muscle goes? What does sarcopenia look like? That's what it looks like. And there's a timeline from your 40s to your 90s. So basically, aging process really is just, we will lose our muscle. If we do nothing, our muscle is going to be gone. I broke my foot 9 years ago, I broke my foot, and I took daily shots of my calf because I couldn't do no activity, and I could see the atrophy every day. I could see how quickly it was atrophied, and I was a lot younger then than I am now. So you can see it visually in your head, in your eyes. But if after the age of 40, the amount of muscle in your tissue is by 8% per decade, but then after age of 70, it accelerates to 15% per decade. So these are quite a lot of consequences if we look at this. This is all what happens if we lose our muscle. So number 1, our brain volume is going to go down. So we talk about, dementia is quite a big thing at the moment. We talk about cognitive health. There's my research hero is a woman called Maria Fietaronen Singh, who is a gerontologist in Sydney Uni at the moment. When she was in the 1990s in Boston, she did a study for people aged between 90 and 100, looking at strength training for really old people. And people would say to her, "Oh no, you're going to kill them all." And everybody would say, "Oh no, disaster." And she's tiny with big hair and she's awesome. And she did it and they improved tremendously. And she's now in Sydney, and her research on cognition, I have some slides, later on, and she has some serious writing. She published a paper 2 weeks ago where she and another author said that wakey gerontologists, and in Australia, this was 2-3 weeks ago, and the paid channels that really don't often talk about real research. They were talking about osteoporosis, and they had their GP who said, "Oh, have a DEXA scan and then talk to your GP about medications." So it's like, hello, really? So this is the message we were trying to give to people, that if you have osteoporosis, just take a scan and have some pills. That was her answer. She also, the same GP, by the way, said that you can't lose weight by diet and exercise. It's like, this is the mainstream media, and we have to go fighting against them. So brain volume. Immunity is a big one. Like I said before about the protein. So the protein is the builder of your muscles. You eat protein to get it to your body. Protein gets stored in your muscles, and your muscles, therefore, you have to eat the protein to have it. But furthermore, you have to create the place where you store the protein. So then that's why your immunity goes down, because if you don't have protein reserves, you don't have immunity. Increase in falls. We all know that. We talked about falls before. Jenny's going to talk about falls. Strength, of course, goes down. If strength goes down, mobility goes down. Osteoporosis, if we don't have impact forces, osteoporosis. I mean, the big thing of this, osteoporosis, we talked about since the 60s. Everybody knows osteoporosis. We know brittle bones and everything else, about osteoporosis. There's still a lot of people who don't know what is sarcopenia. So sarcopenia is quite relatively new compared to osteoporosis when it comes to understanding frailty. They still don't understand what's going on, and GPs are not very good at dealing with sarcopenia. Because of all of this, our life expectancy goes down. Over there's cognition, goes together with the brain volume. So cognition goes down, your cardiovascular disease risk, because of course your blood pressure is helped by exercise, will look like. Healthy aging compared to normal age-related decline compared to disuse. This is what a muscle looks like. And then we can compare them to what kind of activities. So if we have disuse event where people really don't do much, compared to normal age-related, so you exercise a little bit less, compared to if you stay active. And healthy aging recommendation has two things, protein and resistance training. So why do we then need to do these? Number one, the muscle. Muscle is the largest organ system in our body. Secondly, the skeletal muscle stores almost 50% of the protein we have. Also, the muscle is the main movers. But what we need to do is also, they're endocrine organs. And that's the message we have to go through. They're not some pretty little things that the influencers try to grow and their duck lips when they're posing in front of the, It's not about them, it's about the health benefits. My gym that I go to, they had this thing, why do you go to gym? And they were like, other people. And I just wrote the one phrase, exercise is medicine. So I'm just a scary lady who tells off the teenagers when they leave their phones. And I was like, just move your stuff, move your plates. So I'm the evil woman there. I'm like the gym police. But trying to make them understand, this is why we do this. It's nothing to do with if you're bulky and everything else. And also then, it's maintaining health and preventing disease. So that's your muscles. What is the protein then? Protein is there to build and repair cells, including muscle tissue repair and immunity assistance. So the same thing, if you get ill, we have to bring cells, boom, boom. Recommended dosage, adults, it was actually interesting, the previous slide had a different dosage. 1 gram per body weight kilogram per day, and adults over 70, 1.2 grams of body weight kilograms in body weight per day. The previous slide said 1.6 grams. So, maybe I should read that article with more care rather than just taking their pictures. So that's the important thing. And if we do these right, this is what happens. That's our reserve bank of health. And that's what we have to do, eat protein and do strength training. And furthermore, what I like always saying is this is your legs are your muscles of life. If you think you have here 4, you have quads, hammies, there's 2 of them, big glutes, big side muscles. But this is like the ultimate reserve bank. This is like the best stock market in the planet. It's really, really good stuff. So your legs are your muscles of life. If you do your legs, I mean, before I was just like, oh, don't forget the leg day, like the classic bodybuilding from some Arnold Schwarzenegger times, but it's really important. So Arnie was right. Leg days are the most important days because they're big muscles. There's lots of different fibers, a lot of area. So that's why we can then take a look at this. People like talk about money. Kids in primary school, they're taught about wealth management and open your bank account when you're born. So let's compare this to wealth. How does it look like? Basic banking, piggy bank. Yeah, clean your floor, you get 5 cents, put it in your piggy bank. This is when people say, gym is not for me, I'll do gardening, I'll go walking. And then they say, any exercise is good exercise. Yes, any exercise is good exercise because it's going to keep you going. But let's not trick ourselves to thinking that it's the best. It's better than nothing, yes. It's good for your, and this is for health factors. It's good for your mental health and everything else. Going for a walk with your girlfriend is great. However, if we're talking about the medicinal effects, piggy bank, or putting money under your mattress or something like this. So it's really good for general health, but does it do magic? Not really. So rather than piggy bank, we take our money then to the bank. So we bit better. So then we include some strength training. So we do a little bit of, still prefer gardening and stuff, but don't do including, but also we focus a little bit on nutrients. So you go, oh yeah, you look a little bit of that, there's vitamin, you understand maybe that there's vitamins, that there's minerals, and maybe a little protein. Maybe there's a bit of chicken fillet or maybe an egg every now and then, but not really calculated. So that's your stuff. But if you then really want to do this, here you are, the stock market. Here we are. Let's get serious. Let's do an investment account. So this is when we have the stock market. So the stock market is there, so it's prescribed progressive strength training. So we look at sets and reps and intensities, and we look at timing and really focus on what we do. Not just go and do a 1 kilo dumbbell like 150 million times and say, yay, we're doing something good. And also having the protein. But take a look at this. Stock market, there's a big dip. So what does this dip mean when we think about this? This is illness in your stock market. But because we're doing the right thing, we can actually use the reserves to fight the disease. And therefore, constant growth allowing for withdrawals. So, if you have your stock markets, sometimes the dip times are really great. Because that's when you can grow more. If you have a lot of stocks and they're really low, that's when you buy them, yeah? Because you want to buy them because they're cheap and then you wait for them to grow. You never ever sell your stocks when they're there, unless you're really desperate. Like you want to go skiing and you sell your Nokia stocks when you're a stupid uni student. Been there, done that. I bought the Nokia stocks like 1981, by the way, and I sold them to go to skiing in Switzerland. Big mistake. Anyway, don't be me. Focus on your health and think about the stock market. So this is what we try to do this. So, so don't use a piggy bank. Go to the stock market of health. Do the right stuff. Focus on what you're doing. If you go to gym anytime, pay attention to what you're doing. Because then if we do that, that's what we get. So if you have this sedentary living, again, another paper from this year, boom, boom, another one of this miracle stuff that came out this year. So sedentary living leads into the cognitively impaired and physically dependent. If you do recreational activity, so that's like the little bank account, mild cognitive impairment and mobility maybe. If you then do resistance training, hooray, our brain is working, we're happy and healthy. And this is why we've got to do the exercise. And I'm going to go so over time, I've got to go and stop let Jenny talking. So I'm just quickly going to finish up because I don't even have a clock. I have no idea what the time is. So these are the exercise recommendations. So we have a total of 150 minutes a week with the preferred 30 minutes in most days with strength training 2 to 3 times per day. A week. And that means it's the 48-hour period when the strength is still valid. So it's always 48 hours without going to the deep physiology. But also then having balance and strength and stretching exercises. Balance is super, super important. Protein intake, again, 1 gram per kilogram body weight for younger people and over 70, then 1.2 grams. Now, my favorite lady, research lady, this came out 2 years ago. The other paper came 2 weeks ago, but this was 2 years ago. Get your hands on this. It's on our blog. Definitely. I have the link straight there in our Australia blog feed, I think earlier this year. Or I have it. Come and ask me. I have it always. I love this. International Exercise Recommendations for Older Adults, Expert Consensus Guidelines. Last author, my superhero, Maria Fietaranne-Singh. So this was not just one research group, this was not one country. These are people all around the world, from Europe to Brazil and other countries in the middle of talking about them. The key thing, aging is the major risk factor for most chronic diseases, but also vice versa. Chronic diseases, the so-called geriatric syndromes and or adverse consequences of their treatment may accelerate biological aging. So they really go hand in hand. This article, take a photo of it, find it. It's an open access journal. It goes through all the exercises. It's absolutely brilliant. It's so good, and I have some slides from it. But again, it's an open access and really good ones. So it goes through exercise, improve physical function and quality of life. We all know that. And also that physical activity and exercise can prevent and treat many, or if not most, chronic diseases. So really, and they go through all the FIT principles in this article. So they tell exactly what are the sets, the reps, the intensity. Everything is in there. And then just the specifics. With walking, again, the piggyback mentality, walking is always good. Sometimes walking is not good at all. If you have someone shuffling gait, someone's really frail, walking is not a good exercise. In the beginning, some of the exercise research was really going pear-shaped because people found only exercise was always linking to falling. If you should not be falling, walking leads into falls because you should not be doing that. So get the strength first, get the technique right, then you can do the walking. It's important to do the gait training, but again, if a person cannot support their body weight independently, the initial priority should be resistance, strength and power training, as well as balance training before you do the walking. So this is sort of where we really can go wrong. And then the resistance training, 2 to 3 times a week, starting with 1 to 2 sets and progressing to 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps. These are the big things. Again, not trying to, even when I did my first strength training course, whatever, late 80s, it was always, 25 reps and this and that. We didn't know. Now we know that medicine and exercise science, they work together hand in hand, and they do these developments and they do update all the information. We have to keep an eye on it. You guys here do that, but, take it to everybody else. Power training. Again, with sarcopenia, power goes way before anything else. In our webinar series, we have a really, really nice webinar. So Robin Daly, who's a professor in Deakin Uni, who's a frailty leader, was one of our keynote speakers. Really, really nice. You will find, that's where I got the graphics from, because he was using my sarcopenia graphics. Like, oh, I love that. So thankfully he had a link there, so I'm not stealing anything, I'm just reusing the link. So that's the main exercises and aerobic exercises, initially 5 to 10 minutes, progressing to 15 to 30 minutes and going through. And then of course there's a balance and multi-component exercises. So we've been very lucky in Australia that we've had, all these protocols are created. I'm not even going to go to Sunbeam because Jenny's going to talk about Sunbeam. So Sunbeam was for residential aged care. There's another one called Muscling Up Against Disability. So Jenny's supervisor, Tim Hewitt, actually did the MUAT study as well as part of that with other people. So really coming up good protocols on how you can get your goals. Really good research groups or really good protocols. There's some differences, but there's similarities, like 3 sets to 10 reps and 8 to 12 reps, both having a balance component as well. So we've been very lucky to create these cookbooks. Like again, the Fietaranne-Singh paper, massive cookbook, but then we have the other protocols, and it makes people's lives easier when someone tells you exactly what to do. Cookbooks are great. We remember our Nana's recipes, but how many of us go to supermarkets and go, "Ooh, here I go," and you get the perfect recipe if you've never cooked something. I admit I don't know anything to do with bok choy. Someone always gives me bok choy. I have no idea what to do with bok choy. So I got a cookbook. So if you go to a gym, you have no idea what to do. Talk to someone who knows. But people don't do this. This is the thing. They just go, let's go for a walk with my friends and I do gardening. Don't do that. Don't be, go to the person who knows. We all need cookbooks to understand what we should be doing. And if someone then walks you through the cookbook and tells you what to do. So I'm going to just finish off here, otherwise I could be here talking forever. So really with the stronger, healthier, happier message really is like never give up. I mean, that's the other thing, is like even with frail people, I gave a talk in Akbar. Look, I have a mum with Alzheimer's living in Finland, and she fell and broke her femur, and consequently their physio, she didn't get physio. They just didn't give her any physio, and so I was on the phone organising my siblings to what to do, and we got her up and going, which was really great. So just don't give up. Oh, and the physio, by the way, who was looking after mum, said to my sister, "Oh, I thought you'd never get her out of bed." I was like, "Well, thanks for the attitude, mate. Thanks for never seeing my mum." So boom, boom, we proved you wrong because we didn't give up. Not everyone who's old is frail. We have this thing thinking that if someone's old, they're frail. They're not. Some people, look, I had my grandma was riding a bike at 87, and in Adelaide, the oldest Australian is going to gym twice a week, and she's now 110. She's also the oldest Dutch-born person, so she's 110, she's awesome. On her 100th birthday, she did a parachute jump. So that's what she did, and she's rocking, she's awesome. Even though I'm always afraid, what happens with the land? Like, do they have the core to bring up the legs, you know, like when you land, you know? I think the flight is okay and everything, it's just the landing I would be concerned about. Yeah, but she's 110, and it's you know, it's up to you. I mean, there's people, it's hard. I mean, sometimes I go to the gym and I yawn and people go, "You should go home because you're tired." It's like, yes, I am tired. I'm yawning every time, but I'm here. I'm not on the sofa watching TV, which I would be happily be doing. However, I'm making an effort. So, you know, you have to make choices. Frail people can be active. That's the other thing is, you know, you don't have to be inactive if you're frail. Nutrition, exercise, key points. Exercise leads to better health, that leads to improvement in quality of life and independence. So that's why we exercise. So remember the stock market. That's a new slide. You guys are the first ones, by the way, who saw the slide. It's been in my head and finally got into action making my slide about stock market, because I thought maybe that will wake up the people who think about money. All right, I'm going to stop talking now, right now, otherwise I will never stop. And I'm going to give Jenny the microphone so Jenny can introduce, she is a special one. Jenny is special, she has a real microphone. I'm going to turn this off. Thank you everyone for listening to my ramblings, and I'm going to let Johnny talk about Sunbeam.
Just do a test. Can you hear me through this microphone? Yes. Thank you, Ture. I feel like while we're setting up our tech here, everyone should stand up and sit down a few times. Get a little resistance training in the legs, stand up, go up in your tippy toes, sit down gently, get careful if the seat flipped up. Have a wriggle and we'll be ready to run. Right. Well, I'd like to start by saying a very big thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you today. I'm passionate about exercising with older adults and the oldest old, and it's lovely to be in a room full of like-minded people. And hopefully what we'll achieve by the end of our session together is an understanding of how Sunbeam, why Sunbeam happened in the first place, how it's evolved, and where we can take it from here. So a big thank you to her for inviting me to come, and for our hosts, and a special shout out to Aaron, who's just been my saviour here with getting all the tech going. So today we're going to talk about exercise, restoration, reablement, cost effectiveness, because that factors in no matter how warm and fuzzy we feel when we get somebody disabled and frail back on their feet. We have to see, you know, how can we make this financially sustainable as well. And then we'll talk about evidence for changing care models. And I love having this particular picture here. It's not a file footage. These are my residents from the Sunbeam trial. So I live in Australia near the coast, in a place very near a place called Byron Bay. You may or may not have heard of it. It's a surf kind of guru mecca place. And when the village that participated in the Sunbeam, the last village to participate in the trial, which had gone on for 6 years by then, when they had their 25th anniversary of opening, they put a shout out to the residents. How would you like to celebrate? We can have high tea, we can have a nice dinner. We can invite your families. We could have a games day where you bring your grandchildren in and play with them. We could get a Harley Davidson. And then the vote came back and the Harley Davidson was the clear winner. And so this fellow arrived with his fuzzy beard and his dark glasses and his big Harley Davidson. And the step to get on it is this little thing here, which is about this high and about this wide with a sharp edge. You can imagine what can happen to 90-year-old shins if they go near it. And so I was a little worried about how it would work. We hired him for an hour. He was there for 4 hours because there was a line with people with wheelie walkers right down the road waiting to get on. Sometimes it would take us 15 minutes to get a person on there. But if you want to do it, why not, right? This is what just because you're very old doesn't mean you've lost your dreams and aspirations. It should be another chapter in your life where with the right kind of support you can still aim for something, work for it and achieve it. So one of the funniest parts of that day for me though was when you finally get people on and then you put that big heavy leather jacket on and they go and then you put the helmet on and it's oh, and as it took off they were like oh. Anyway, it was a wonderful day and you know kept me inspired for sure. So just by way of background, I'm a clinician. I love physiotherapy. I've always loved the way that we can take somebody who's functioning at a certain level of potential and then double it or triple it and change a life. And that's why I used to be a sports physio when we were trying to tweak this last couple of bits of perfection. And I moved into gerontology and saw that we could make big changes that changed a whole life. And I thought that the move to gerontology was going to be for a short period of time, but it's been for the last 15 years and I'm never going back. I love it. But I was disillusioned with the way that physiotherapy and allied health in particular, exercise physiology and occupational therapy as well, was funded in Australian residential or long-term care facilities. And so I thought, well, I should probably search for some evidence and then just put some sort of paper together, present it to the policymakers and say, why don't you consider including exercise? Exercise was not included in the funding models for residents of long-term care. But when I went to look for it, there wasn't much. We'll talk about that a little bit later. This is 2010, 11 maybe. So we ended up conducting a cluster randomised control trial and a cost-effectiveness analysis, and then took the evidence to try and lobby for change. So this has sort of been going on since about 2011. And I'm so excited because when I first started doing this, I didn't know whether any damn thing worked either, like whether you just get somebody up and walking, whether that would work, because we were still looking for, there wasn't, the beautiful evidence through has just shown us now wasn't present. But what I learnt along the way and what's being shown over and over and being published in a plethora of journals recently is that it really matters what type of exercise you do. It's pivotal to the results that you get, and so that's very encouraging from my perspective. So just to give you a little, I purposely chose a 1950s photo of a nurse to take this picture to government and say this is what you're funding, basically really outdated, old-fashioned types of treatments. There was no funding for any intervention that was focusing on reablement, restoration. If you got sick and you went downhill because you're in bed, then there wasn't an opportunity to try and get back on your feet. We were able under that in those days to provide massage or the TENS machines for pain relief. And I've got to say TENS machines for pain relief kind of works because I've used it myself in the last 6 months. But it's not permanent. It's a temporary fix like taking a Panadol. And honestly, you can train anybody to whack a TENS machine on. Why would they be paying for trained allied health people to do that as the regular treatment? It's an adjunct but not the primary part of treatment. And I was thinking, as I said, what kind of old do I want to be? I want to be daring, bold, all of those things, jumping up. If I'm 100, I don't think I'll still jump out of a parachute. If I'm 100, there's something. I might go on a Harley Davidson. I love this fellow used to come to the gym wearing his Get Bold Not Old shirt every time. He was, the pride was there. And so how are we going to be able to deliver that to people? So I chose falls as the primary outcome for the Sunbeam trial because people listen to falls. Government listens to falls. It costs them a lot of money to treat people with falls. But my personal primary driver is quality of life and the ability for people to participate in whatever they want to if we can enable them. But I chose falls, and we know that falls are caused by a whole lot of risk factors. So the strength and the balance, as a physiotherapist, the strength and the balance is what I was focusing on. But we need to keep in mind that we should be looking at all of these if we're going to perform a comprehensive assessment with our patients or clients. And we can certainly remediate the strength and balance with the right type of exercise, but we want to include the pharmacist or the general practitioner to have a look if they're on multiple medications, for example. Poor nutrition, Ture's just been talking about that. We want to make sure that there's adequate protein. We want a toileting plan so that they're not running to the loo. Maybe monitoring, being careful about how much water you drink later in the day and have it more so that you're not getting up halfway through the night. Those sorts of things are important too. But in Sunbeam, I didn't look at any of that. I just focused on strength and balance, and the rest of it was kind of pot luck. So we still got a great result, but we can do even better if we look at all of those things. So when I first started looking at this, when I said I was going to search for evidence and try and go to government and say you're funding the wrong thing, there was a few studies out. There was a Cochrane review, which is of course our gold standard, where they've gone to all the trouble to bring in other people's studies and analyse them. And they found that vitamin D supplementation, so taking a pill, which I found really distressing, taking a pill did seem to work. Things that might work was going through that big long list of risk factors that I said. This is old, by the way, so I'm giving you background slides here. And at the time, they said, and this is Cochrane and the clinical practice guidelines from the British and the American geriatric societies, said we really don't know if exercise works. It's like, oh no, that was 2012, right? So this is the background slides. Don't take this away as your take-home message. And then the ripple effect of that is as soon as you write something like that in a big, well-respected, or in a couple of big, well-respected international journals, people stop funding it. And so I was devastated because what was in the research did not match what I was seeing in clinical practice. And so I thought, you know, I'm living in a small country town with about 350 resident people living in it at the time, out in the country. Didn't need a PhD. I wanted to help change that situation. And the only way to do it was to conduct some research myself. And so I re-enrolled and had the support of some amazing academics to keep the research on track, so that if you're going to put all that effort in, you don't want to find out that you took on some lousy research methodology. So I basically became an academic, and now I'm both. So let's take a look. First of all, that's all. How many exercise trials were included in those studies when they said exercise doesn't seem to work? That's it. So it's 600 studies for people who lived in community dwelling, you know, in their own homes, out in the community, and only a handful of studies that were performed in the residential care setting. And then some of the exercise, so this is a forest plot, which means there's a line down the middle, and the exercise program result falls on that side. It means they'd have been better to stay in bed, don't do the exercise, because the result favoured the usual care was better than the exercise program. And if it fell on this side, so that's the red square, if it falls on this side, it favours the exercise program. So obviously what these people did mattered, right? Because if you pull all of these dots together mathematically, put them all together, you get a result down here which says we don't know if it works or not. But what happened in that one there dragged the ones on this side towards the centre. And so I thought, well, I might not know how, in those days, I might not know how to do a forest plot, but I could see that that's a problem. So let's find out, what did they actually do? What did all of those trials actually do? There's my light bulb moment. We know exercise is like medicine. The type of exercise, the dose of exercise, the frequency of exercise matter. And what if all those studies were doing the wrong thing? And then we just end up with a result that says exercise doesn't work, or we don't think it works. So that's where I started. So I had a look at the ones that fell on this side of the line. What were the more effective ones? There was one that used bilateral separated treadmill versus usual care. There was another one that said computer-based balance training, and I had a vision of that, but I don't think that's what they meant. And then another one was a Pilates-style resistance and balance training program. So there wasn't really anything in those. See how old these studies, oh, that one was close to the time, but these were older studies at the time. Exercises that showed an increase in fall rates. Functional walking, range of motion with leg weights and walking, heel raises and 10 minutes of walking. What's the common exercise? Walking, yeah. And at that time I was up against management of long-term care providers saying to me, we don't need to do a specific exercise program, we have walking group. Every day we have a walking group. It's lovely, they love it. And so the walking was actually associated with as if it's a standalone program, it was associated with an increase in falls rates. Which means, it'll lead on to the next slide, it doesn't mean walking's bad for you, it just means you don't call it a falls prevention program. So you do your walking as an adjunct, and you do it, as Claudia said, you do it because it's lovely to go for a walk. It might help with cardiovascular training, depending on the intensity of that too. And it's certainly good to keep walking when you're younger. So, you know, a lot of our residents end up moving into residential care, and then their days become so sedentary. Even if they walk to their meals and 1 or 2 activities a day, they're still probably spending 21 at least, probably that's generous, 22 hours being sedentary out of the day. So walking might help with that, but it's not for falls prevention. So I think if you think about walking, it makes sense. If you get somebody who's been sitting in a chair for a long time or resting for a long time, you say, let's just do a walking program. And you haven't trained them in how to catch themselves if they start to fall. And even if they can catch themselves, if their leg is so weak it just buckles underneath them, then asking people to start walking is exposing them to increased risk of falls. You need to address those other factors before you send them out walking. Or if they already are walking, then you add in the other parts that we're about to talk about now to help them with their falls. So there's a lot of information on this, but this is the sum of it. So back in 2011, when I first started looking at this, somebody, Kathy Sherrington and Ann Tiedemann, physio and exercise physiologist, pulled together all of the exercise for falls prevention research and said, okay, what are the key components of effective exercise for falls prevention? And so the total dose of exercise, 50 hours, I should have up there, that's over a 6-month period. So that's around about 2 hours a week. So I wasn't seeing that in residential care. High level balance work, I wasn't seeing that either. Mostly people were doing fun things sitting down. Strength work for those who were deconditioned, and even without running around and doing a whole lot of biometric tests, I was fairly confident that because the people I was looking after were so sedentary, the deconditioning was a big factor for them. All exercise need to be individually upgraded and progressed, so you can't just give a cookie cutter approach, everybody hand out a sheet of exercises and say do this. Had to be closely supervised so that you could do the high challenge balance work, and then maintain the exercises, so don't just go ham for 6 months and then go back to sitting in the chair for 22 hours a day. Like the rest of it, you use it or you lose it. And a walking program, while it's beneficial for other things, is not a falls prevention program. And those key components have carried forward into the more recently updated version as well. But all of this was going on, thankfully, all of this was going on when I was trying to design what sort of exercise program to research. I've got that, that picture up there because you guys know this because you work in the field, but a lot of people think when you're older you can't sort of transfer from the before to the after. But with the right type of exercise, doesn't matter how old you are, you can. Admittedly, I think there's been a bit of waxing and spray tanning. So back to the, all right, we need to do a cluster randomised control trial, clinical trial, and a cost effectiveness analysis if we want to try and change policy. So that's how it all started. There's other ways of doing it now. It doesn't have to be a cluster randomised control trial. It's just that was the preferred method of studying back then. So the research questions were, if we do resistance and balance training in the right dose for the right period of time, do we reduce falls? Do we also improve physical performance? So can people do more physically as well afterwards? And is it cost effective? So this study was carried out, Australia's a big place, Sydney University's down there, I live there, and so it was easier to conduct it up in my neck of the woods. We had 16 aged care facilities, and 221 dear, darling, precious residents said, okay, I know I'm old and I'm frail, my family think I'm mad, but I'll put my hand up to be a guinea pig for your trial. And so that really helped us to make sure that our study, was a big enough size to conduct some statistical analyses. It's called Sunbeam because I went into Acronym Finder, don't know whether you've ever heard of it, and I typed in strength and balance exercise in aged care, and it spat out 342 possibilities. Some of them were really X-rated and you just never, just delete. But I had a couple and I quite liked stable, S-T-A-B-L-E, strength and balance exercise. But the residents said it made them feel like a horse. I was surprised. They liked strength and balance exercise in aged care. So it is an acronym, but we've just ditched the whole upper and lowercase thing and just call it Sunbeam. And I quite like it because it's sort of a bit positive and blue sky as well. That's the wrong way. Sorry, this is snipped straight out of the protocol page. I mean, out of the publication in JAMDA. The reason I included even those lots of figures and you can, your eyes can, I can almost feel them glazing over, is because I want you to see, people were aged between 65 and 100. So our eldest was 100, but 86 was the mean age in both groups. There were more females. Why is there more females?
Because we live longer.
Yeah, sorry about that, lads. That's right. Falls in the prime months. I was worried about this because you don't do your stats till the end, right? And this carried on over about a 5-year process. And as more people were recruited and randomised, and I saw that I was starting with the group that fell over all the time. And we know that compared to that, falls in the 12 months prior to the study. I was really worried that when we did the stats, I had unexpectedly and by random allocation ended up with the group of people that fell the most. So it's even more meaningful. The results are even more meaningful if you take that into account. There was also more fallers, 69 versus 54. Most of them used mobility aids, and like the people you would see or you would have in your centres, they had heaps of things wrong with them. It's not just one thing. So we're working with a complex group of people with multiple morbidities as well as advanced age. When it looked at the sort of exercises they were doing, a lot of people were doing walking, which kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because you think the people that put their hands up and say, yeah, I'll come and join your clinical trial on exercise, are probably the ones that are already doing a bit. But it was an exclusion criteria if they'd been doing any resistance training before, which was pretty easy because the answer was hardly any of them had done that. Hang on a minute, I'm just going to pause it because there should be sound. We didn't cover the sound running. That's all right, I can do it. Want to park it at the end there? Have you finished all the machines now, Bill? Do you like the wetsuit booties? That's the gym workout wear. Okay, so we'll put it in, make sure it comes up with Hello Zeta. All right, that's good. 2. So keep an ear out. When the machine beeps, you've done your 10 and you can have a rest. That's good. Step behind. So while I had 5 people doing resistance training, I took other people out and did high challenge balance work. Good. So this is helping you balance at the same time because you're not hanging on to anything. That's right.
Flat on our feet and heels. Keep those legs nice and straight.
Tippy toes.
Hang on when we're going
The oldest
backwards.
person here is 100. Never ever came to the
flat,
gym until the camera
and back
arrived.
on our heels.
Static balance. Static balance is a bit dull, but it's part of the program. Feet together, eyes closed, etc. You can see that
Lunchtime, sun's over the yard arm.
this
We're
is
going
reaching
to reach
outside the
out
base of support. So people fall when
and
they
just
reach
get
the
that
things.
nice, we're on a boat, we've got a bit of a swell, rocking, reaching, catching. Drop out, push our leg this way. So everybody, we're falling, falling, catch. Falling, falling, catch. Falling, falling, catch.
Watch
Are we
this
ready?
lady.
Falling, falling, catch. Falling, falling, catch.
So not everyone's comfortable with that one, right? And in the paper you'll see it's called recovery steps. And so because I came from a sporting background where you think, okay, if I'm going to train a baseball pitcher to, after a shoulder injury, to get back to pitching a baseball, we'll do all your standard strength and stretching program. We'll have a look at your technique and try to correct your technique. And then if we notice that there's something in particular you're doing that is causing the irritation that brought you in for physio in the first place, we want to work on that specific movement and strengthen you in that with that specific movement. So I started thinking, well, what is it about falls? Now, I don't know if I'm going to do this, but you can choose to participate or not. I'd like you to stand for a minute. And put your feet close together. And we're all going to go the same way because I don't want to see like a pack of dominoes here. We're all going to start to lean to our right, your right, and then come back. And then lean a little bit further and see what you would do if you were going to tip. How would you catch yourself? Thank goodness. Sometimes I see people do this and I go, no, that's not the right way. So usually if we're falling, the way you catch yourself is to shift the foot quickly. If you're falling backwards, it's a backward step. If you lean that way, it's stepping in different directions. So have a seat again. Remember the seats are flopping up. My thinking with that was that it's one thing to do the resistance training and get the legs stronger, but we also have to train. I didn't want to just train most of the falls research had people standing with their feet together. Semi-tandem, tandem, we're going to do that in a minute. And those things are balance exercises, but there's a couple of things wrong. One is that they're boring as anything and nobody wants to do them, and it's really hard to get the right dose. And the other thing is it's not actually dynamic enough, that if you did have a fall, that you have practiced and repeatedly practiced methods of getting out of the, catching yourself before you fall. Similarly, it's no point in just doing the balance so that if you do shoot your foot out quickly, your quads and your lower limb is so weak that it just buckles underneath you. You need both. So the results and the implications, it was published eventually in, so I started the recruitment in 2012, I had no funding for this, it was funded from Love in 2012, and then the gym and I, so HUR heard about the study and said, well, we'll give you some resistance training equipment to use. And it was a risk. I could have been another study that shows it doesn't work. I could have given the wrong dose. I might have not finished it. They didn't know me. But they said, we'll give you some resistance training equipment because we really believe that the resistance training is important. And I thought I could do it just with bands and things, but then I can't be sure that they're getting the proper individualised dose, the scientific dose at the right resistance for that person. And if I'm doing it in a group, which is what I did in a group of 10 people, I don't know what you did and you did and you did. I don't know, you kind of end up all doing similar, even if I give you different bands, similar, and I can't record it and have a really good look at it and see, did the person do an individually prescribed, scientifically prescribed dose of exercise? Whereas with the HUR equipment, I could do that. So I thought, okay, I think I should do that. And what that meant is that the gym equipment and I, and HUR Australia team, would rock up in the removalist van to the residential care village after it had been randomised to be the exercise facility. And we'd set up the gym and the people would come and we'd run the classes 2 days a week, 1 hour session each time for 25 weeks to get you offer you 50 hours of exercise. And then the removalist truck would pull up and we'd load it back on, and the gym would drive, the truck would drive to the next village ready to go. And that's why it took a long time. But even sadder was to see all the residents going as the gym drove away from the building. But we know you need the evidence. They were good sports. And the truly fabulous thing to find out after all of that was to run the statistics, they are complicated statistics, and I was very fortunate to work with Professor Stephen Goodall, who's a health economist and a spectacular mathematician, to run those more complex statistics. What we looked at was the falls rate. It was 3 falls per person per year in the usual care group. It was 1.3. 3, 1.3, 2.9. It equates to an incident rate ratio of 0.45, which means a 55% reduction in falls rate. And Stephen, who's a mathematician from England, so he has a very quiet, reserved way of speaking. And he called me and he said, "I've just completed the analysis." And I said, "How did we go?" He says, "Let me just say, I am cartwheeling around my office." Which I thought was fabulous. And if we look at it in a bit more detail, we see it's the number of falls, 142, the raw numbers, versus 277. The number of people that fell more than 5 times, those repeated fallers, was more than double. It wasn't really powered to pick up the differences in that. Injurious falls, 72. And so, leading back to what you were talking about before, Sean, about the consequence of falls. I love that, because you're right, and I'll show you in a minute about, it's not just the fall, it's whether the fall ruins your life afterwards. So injurious falls was important. Ambulance attendances. The people that were transported to hospital, even if there was an ambulance attendance. And fall-related fractures, which is low numbers in both and not much difference. So that's probably another study, which somebody else will have to do. And I'm sorry this is a bit dark, but I wanted to show you just at an individual level. Can you imagine what it feels like since your last workout? You have progressed. Oh, you have increased this many. You have progressed 257% since your first visit, and just that pride that you see on the residents' faces when they see their own data is amazing. These are some of the quotes. There's our oldest participant. She was 101 by then. She used to bring the bear. Not quite sure about the bear, but let's just go with it. "My back is no longer painful. It used to be my biggest problem. I also feel stronger." So I was worried about cane, because if we've had those trials that said, the systematic review from Cochrane that said we don't know whether exercise works or not, and some of them you were better to leave the person alone and give them the exercise program. I was really nervous that if we did flare things up, how can we undo it? Or if you cause an injury, a soft tissue injury, will it repair? Because that was all quite unknown. I mean, it'll repair a bit, but will it? So these sorts of things were really important as well. I've got much more get up and go. That lady used to say, "My get up and go got up and went." But then in the end, she was saying that. And I love this hospital every month. And she hadn't been in for 6 months. These things meant the world, not just the statistics, that's for sure. These 3 people are in their 90s with a visual impairment. So if you think back to the risk factor slide, they're on the really big risk end of the spectrum. And they had this to say.
A world of difference. I can walk taller. I'm just so much more able to get about.
Let's see if we can get that.
A world of difference. I can walk taller. I'm just so much more able to get about. It's wonderful. As I said, I was a couch potato and I didn't move, and just one day was like the other. Now I look forward to the exercises very much.
And I got out of the car and went to step up the step and tripped on something and went forward violently so that I was parallel with the ground. And I kept on moving and forced myself upwards, and I eventually prevented the fall. I was able to straighten myself up. Yes, I would have fallen flat on my face if I hadn't had those exercises.
Leg-wise, strengthening your legs, to be able to push up from the floor without your hands, and get down into your chair and up easily, and
We'll just roll it.
just generally overall they strengthen the body.
I could just move with my family a little bit more. They don't quite have to wait on me quite so much.
Sorry, I'll just see if I can get their mouth to catch up with their
A
words.
world of difference. I can walk.
Now I'm
A
gonna make
world of difference. I can walk taller. I'm just so much more.
I'll finish up with him, Ken, the last fellow there. They've given me permission to use their names. But he said something really important that relates back to what we were talking about before. And you know, when you're conducting a falls prevention trial, you're tempted to edit out anyone that mentions they had a fall, right? But I think it was really important, and I leave it in because he said, I actually fell, as I started to fall, I fell exactly where I aimed for, and there was no harm done, and I got myself up, and that's because I've been doing these exercises. And that's really important. That's a life changer for some people. I remember going in one day to a village, and we had a long-term care home, and we had our classes on a Monday, and one of the residents was waiting for me at the front door. And as I walked in, he came scurrying over, and he said, I have to tell you, I went to the shops on the weekend, and I was sitting on my wheelie walker with the, oh no, he didn't say the brakes, that's right, this is the problem. I was sitting on my four-wheelie walker, and I saw someone I knew, I haven't seen for a while. He came and I stood up and shook hands with him. And then when I went to sit back down, the walker had wheeled itself away a little bit. And he said, and I just shot my foot back. And I caught myself and stood up and went, that's my falls prevention program. Yeah, so in summary, we now have evidence. We ended up with evidence, thank goodness. We ended up with evidence for falls prevention. For restoration and reablement, it's not just about falls prevention, it's being able to still function, physically function. So we use the short physical performance battery, which is standing up and sitting down 5 times out of a chair without using your arms. Balance, static balance, and a gait speed test. And so walking, balance, and ability to get out of a chair is what we measured, and that showed a statistically significant improvement between the groups as well. We've done a subgroup analysis more recently because there's more and more interest in the effect of exercise on people with, in people with dementia. So we teased out of the group those that had a diagnosis of dementia or a low ASA, Adam Brooks Cognitive Evaluation Score, and we found that it resulted in a 50% reduction in people with dementia as well, in reduction in falls. So that's also very encouraging. And it's cost effective. So we perform these in groups of 10 people. And because we had the smart card technology, it meant that I could, myself or the other physios involved, could prescribe the exercise program initially to get the right dose, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. Turi's already told us anyway, but the right dose for that individual. Save it on a card. And then when the class happens, 10 people arrive, you make it social, there's music playing, everyone's enjoying their time, and all I have to do is sit on the piece of equipment and pop the card in, and it automatically adjusts with the individually prescribed weights, sets the repetitions, and we get on with the business of making it fun. And while they're doing what's been prescribed over there, it only takes 1 or 2, depending on the size of your group, to do all those sort of grapevine exercises that you saw, which I'll show you a bit more of in a minute. And other tricky exercises, and then we can put them together with the table in front and the chair behind and do a few other things for balance as well. And so 5 people doing resistance while the other 5 are doing balance, and then switch. That's how we did it. But the physio doesn't have to be there every session because of the smart card technology. So what it means is they can do the initial prescription, and then you can have therapy assistants run the class the next day and the next day and the next day, and the physio goes back in 2 weeks. And that's all factored in with the cost effectiveness study. So the study's been used a lot, to my great delight. We were able to show those differences, and because it's a clinician, I guess, talking to clinicians, when I'm training it, there's been a really good uptake. And during COVID in Australia, I mean, every country handled it a little bit differently, but in Australia, if any resident in the care home was diagnosed with COVID, all residents were stuck in their rooms until the outbreak was gone. So there was this big increase in deconditioning, especially during 2020 and 2021 when the vaccines were not yet rolled out properly. And so the government made a decision in response to the Australian Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety, pushing them, to say we need to do something for those people who've been stuck in their rooms and getting more and more deconditioned. So is there an exercise program that anyone's heard of that results in improvement in physical performance, gets people back on their feet. And they selected the Sunbeam to roll out across affected sites. So that's another 2,500 residents in residential or long-term care. We had to make this video. You can, if you put in the keywords allied health professional, or you put in Sunbeam protocol video, I think it'll come up. It's in this by the Australian government. Paid for me to make a video on how to do this stuff with or without a gym. The government project, because they didn't have a gym, they had to make the physio there all 4 sessions, and it had to be 4 residents, not 10, because you couldn't keep people safe. I didn't say that, they said it themselves. And it went for 6 months. During that time, there's been a change in funding now in Australian residential or long-term care facilities. The government now recognises that exercise should be included. And I started thinking, well, what about exercise for other things apart from falls prevention? What else can we look at? So I've started more recently just looking into the exercise as medicine for other things apart from falls. We know that targeted exercise results in much improved outcomes for the treatment of older people. So not just falls, but we're talking pain, bone health. I'll go through a few more here. These are now recognised by the World Health Organisation, and guidelines being spat out since Sunbeam started right up until last week, did you say? They're all providing further understanding of why it works. Well, so Sunbeam helped say that it does work, but we didn't necessarily know the underlying reasons why, but now we're starting to understand that better. It is best practice exercise for chronic pain as well. So this is the Scottish Intercollegiate Network performed a systematic review of best practice pain management in 2021. And they came up with exercise regardless of their form. Don't know that I love that one. But exercise is recommended in the management of patients with chronic pain. The following approaches should be used: supervised exercise, individualised in a group setting. Supplementary material means educating people that pain is not harm necessarily. And provision of a group and home exercise program if you don't live in a home with a gym, you need to take something home with you as well. But you can see this delivery method is quite similar to Sunbeam. So what we've started doing more recently is including people with persistent pain. So it's not just people who fall or people who want to get back on their feet for restoration and reablement. It's people with chronic pain are now starting to be included in the same sort of program. Good. Now I figured it might be time of the day that you stood up. Let's take a look. Now, will please take care of themselves, not fall on anybody they know or don't know beside them. So this is what a balanced program can look like if you just go by what's published. Let's start with our feet under hips. We're going to start by tightening up our little toe muscles a bit, raising up our arches, drawing up through the kneecaps. Pull up your kneecaps. Squeeze your cheeks together, and I don't mean these ones. Tummy in, shoulders back, and balance. So for some people, our residents or our clients, this is already hard. If we want to then progress to the next stage, we're going to bring our feet to touching. And then we hold it here like this, same thing, grip the toes, drop through the knees, squeeze the bottom muscles, in with the belly, back with the shoulders, and then we just hold this position. And then if they can achieve that, we might want to make it a little bit more challenging, and that makes semi-tandem. So one foot slightly in front of the other, like mine. I'm hoping you can see it, and you can choose which foot. And now some people will want to tap out soon, use the chair if you need it. Once again, same things, holding the position. And then if you can do that, the next one might be tandem standing. Really wish I had worn these shoes. Good. Now, in a lot of the aged care literature, this is your balance program. So it's interesting, but it's not very entertaining, is it? What we can do to make it a little bit more fun, and front row, be careful, right? Because you've got no chair in front. We can make it a little bit more difficult by closing our eyes. thank goodness some people are rocking. So I think I'm going to have to make this really hard. Now we can start with the number, keep your eyes closed, start with the number 30, start counting back by threes. So you add on a task, a cognitive task, and it gets a little bit harder. Oh, good. Okay. And let's open our eyes before anyone takes a dive. Good. So that's sort of what people are generally promoting for balance exercise. And I think we can all agree that there is certain levels of challenge within that. But you can imagine if you've got a gym going over there with the music playing and everybody talking, and I'm trying to get people over here doing the balance exercises, usually what happens is they'll get off their last piece of gym equipment and then they'll say, thanks love, and go straight home, because after you're doing it for 6 months. So that became quite difficult. Okay, take a seat. So what we've been working on more recently, and I'll cover it in this afternoon's practical workshop, is ways to make balance more engaging and more interesting. I've been working with some of the team from HUR Australia on, they have a balance platform, the Smart Balance, and we've been working on building some games into it that require you to move your feet to different positions and to rock from side to side. So it's that sort of exergaming approach. And I work with students who come up to my area in Australia on clinical placement when studying physiotherapy, exercise physiology and occupational therapy. And the students and I have a lot of fun coming up with fun games to make balance more engaging. I'll see if I can get, oops, this fellow, if you can hear him. He was on my last day of data collection, and he'd written me a poem. Oh. Don't want to play. Luckily I remember it. He said to me, a man's not old when his hair turns grey. A man's not old when his teeth decay. But a man's fast reaching his long last sleep when his mind makes an appointment that his body won't keep. Isn't it gorgeous? That pretty much sums it up. So as I said earlier, we've got to talk about, so we're looking at balance, we're looking at strength, but we've got to be able to balance the book. So it's one thing to have those lofty goals of doing these amazing programs for people, but it has to be cost effective. So we did conduct a cost effectiveness analysis as well, which is published here in Clinical Rehabilitation. And what you're basically looking at is the cost of delivering the intervention minus the cost of delivering usual care. So for each person that was $463, and I'll tell you why in a minute. The cost of usual care was $0. Then we have the effect of the intervention, which is 55% reduction in falls, minus the effect of usual care, which was an increase in falls. And the clever people in the health economics department pop out with something called an incremental cost effectiveness ratio. So the cost of the intervention, as I said, we had 10 people in a group and the physio there once a fortnight. We had 5 pieces of equipment, so it was a hip abduction, adduction machine, knee extension or leg extension, leg curl, so it's for the front and back of the legs. The abdomen back is the one there where the man sitting on the chair with the bar behind him. We had leg press, triceps. Why do you think I might have put triceps in? Yeah, you got it. You're just shy, but you're right. Because people can't get out of chairs. You know, let's try and help them be able to get up out of the chairs. Have I left any out? Yeah. So the physio was there once a fortnight. The therapy assistants were there 4 days a fortnight. But the machinery had this sort of 10-year warranty, so that factors in. And that's what's happening now. In Australia, those places that bought the resistance bands and the ankle weights there, the resistance bands are hundreds of dollars at a time and they're replacing them already. They don't last very long, especially when you've got to use COVID precautions and wipe them down with 70% alcohol. They last about a week. So what we did, or 2 weeks, so what we've been doing is using the resistance band and putting them in a little plastic labelled bag, Ziploc, and that's the single use for one person to use. That's how we've got around it. So we calculated the cost of treating a fall with as much precision as we could. So in Australia, a physiotherapist is often called to review someone who's had a fall. So there's a cost of a visit. The aged care employees, we did a time motion analysis, so we looked at how much time when somebody's had a fall. I hate talking about this in dollar figures because obviously the cost of the fall is to the individual and the people that love them is bigger than we can manage, right? But we're talking here in dollar figures. We started looking at what it costs for the person, the carers on the ground, literally, to care for them. In terms of time, we looked at it in a subgroup of care homes. Then the registered nurse has to complete an incident form, contact the family, set up and make entries into the progress notes, set up a number of steps. Then the medical practitioner for those injurious falls, we factored that in because they're reviewing the injurious falls. For every ambulance cost, we factored in how far they drove and what it cost for that ambulance attendance, as well as the initial assessment if they didn't travel anywhere, if the ambulance people just came but they didn't transport them. We looked at the cost of admitting a person with an injurious fall to hospital. We looked at the hospitalisations for the people that had sustained fractures. And then what happened if you didn't sustain a fracture but you went to hospital and they did your assessment and they transferred you home. And so that's how we were able to calculate the cost effectiveness. So when you put all that together, what does it actually mean in real terms? I personally need to understand what that actually means in real terms, right? So the ISA, incremental cost effectiveness ratio, is $22 per fall avoided. What does that mean? What it means, let's say if you have an aged care home, a long-term care home with 70 residents, then about 25% of them attend, which is probably you'll have more, but so we were being conservative with that. If you do nothing new with 70 residents and using the calculations of what we saw in the usual care group, you're probably going to have 64 falls a year. So the cost per fall is that, and that's the annual 111,000 is your annual cost. If you fund the Sunbeam program instead, you're going to have fewer falls. So even though we know they had more injurious falls in the usual care group, we were trying to be as fair as possible and just call it the same cost. Just by having less falls means that you're going to have a much lower cost of treating the fall. In fact, the projected cost benefit was about $62,000 a year. These was done Australian dollars and performed in 2017. And at the time, the gym cost about $74,000. So in the first year, it had paid for itself, but then you've got it for another 9 years on top of it. So getting your head around the expense, if you relate it back to what you're spending, if you're not spending it on the gym equipment, you're going to be spending it on treating the falls. Then we had a bit of fun and said, what about if everybody in Australia funded the Sunbeam program exactly as we did it? At that time, there was 172,000 people living in residential care homes. So if 25% of them did the Sunbeam program, it'll be about 43,000. If you do nothing new, just continue as they are right now, expecting $217 million to treat the falls. If you fund the program and with the lowest, using the same method as we used on the previous slide, it's $97 million to treat the falls, which is a projected $120 million saving to the health economy. So suddenly the policymakers are listening, and that's why they funded it in COVID. I was really pleased to see that now when you look at what's best practice for falls prevention, it says vitamin D, multi-component. There's been other work going on simultaneously about reviewing people's medication, and then these physiotherapy exercises is what they called it, but they meant the Sunbeam program. And the gold bars is how many good quality randomised control trials approved at this point. So that's the one is Sunbeam, one for that, and there's 3 for vitamin D supplementation. I really want to acknowledge this, all these aged care villages and those residents who helped with this, because we had no proof that it was going to work in the beginning and it could have gone the other way. And then these amazing people who helped keep me on track, physiotherapists, health economists, occupational therapists, exercise physiologists, a truly multidisciplinary team, health economist as well now. And to her health and fitness, because if you didn't provide me with the equipment, I feel I might have missed the mark with the resistance training component, and I don't think we would have ended up with the same result. So just to start to bring it to a close, this is why I love what I do. So I want to tell you the story of Les. Les had Parkinson's disease, in the end stage, Parkinson's disease, and he had been for 6 months laying in his bed, or at best being hoisted by 2 people in a mechanical hoist into a large float chair, which is one of those sort of recliner lounge chairs on wheels. And he couldn't speak anymore. And he saw the students and I going past. We'd been doing our strength and balance program, and then taking some of the residents on walks back. And he went. and I went in there, and he got out his little communication board, and because he was cognitively intact, his body was just letting him down. And he used the board, and he went, "I want to walk too." And I'm like, don't want to over-promise and under-deliver, right? Because he really meant it. And we went, okay, so the students would go in, did an initial assessment, looking at his range of motion, looking at his strength. He'd been 6 months bedridden, but a long time before that, deteriorating to that point. And so he started with bed-based exercises. And then he moved on, once we could get him to the point that we could hoist him onto the equipment, then we hoist him onto the equipment. And he does the resistance training. By the end of the first 5-week block, he was able to stand, holding on to the 5 weeks is how long a student block is. Stand, holding on to that forearm support frame. By the end of the second 5-week block, so 10 weeks in, that's him. And so he was like, okay, the trouble with Parkinson's disease, you can't really lose your facial expressions, right? That's actually joyful, I can tell you. Then his next goal was, okay, well, what would you like to do now? And he goes, I think I'm with the board. I want to move. I want to be able to walk, because his room was just around the corner. I want to be able to walk all the way to the dining room. So we worked on that. He gets to the dining room to a massive round of applause from the staff and all the residents in there at lunchtime. It was like, what's your next goal? I want to take my wife on a date. Oh, right. So that involves being able to sit with postural support in the windy country, pothole-driven roads and zigzag all the way, because where do they want to go? I said, where do you want to go? And she said, we've been talking about it. We just want to go home. He wants his favourite meal. He wants to sit in his favourite chair. He wants to have, and we're just going to go like we were back in the day. And so here he is getting into the wheelchair taxi, and here he is in his favourite chair. And so this was after, it was 10 weeks when he was walking, so that's about 3 weeks later, after such a long period. And that's why we do what we do. So in summary, exercise, restoration and reablement are possible in long-term care. There is evidence of both health benefits and cost effectiveness of such programs. And I just think it's important for all of us, Edward Stanley. I think our plan next is, I just realised, have I been yelling at you? No, I forgot I have this on. I'm projecting my voice. We're going to sit down and take any questions or comments you may have. Are we inviting them?
If anyone wants to come, this is the moment.
It's a very big table if it's just the 2 of us.
Oh,
I'll have mine.
there you go. You can meet him.
You're going to come too? Yes, please. That would be great. Dr. Sean, do you want to come join? Maybe Dr. Edwards? No, that's not. Do you want to come?
Have you do the front row?
Oh, you've got to. So we have about 15 minutes left, and it would be very lovely to answer any specific questions you have about the program or anything else we've spoken about today, or maybe something we haven't spoken about today and you wish we had.
How would you go about doing the motivation part, because this is aged care in a residential. In Singapore, at least, we try and delay that until there's no other way. It's mostly about aging in place. How to get people out of their flats, especially guys who are very impulsive generally. So one is on motivation. The second point I want to make is that I'm a believer of this, but it is also very high touch. How do we try and change that for lack of a better phrase, which is not very nice, the masses? Because we are talking about people that's rapidly aging, certain constraints of money and time and effort and resources. How would we try and change that slightly for Singapore to make this work?
You can start. I've got this on, I'll turn it off in a minute.
Oh,
Otherwise we'll stay.
So
Do you want me to turn it off?
perhaps I can give
Is
the...
it? You can.
Yeah.
You go.
Right. Okay, so I just thought it would be actually it's a very good question in the context of
Yes,
Singapore.
thank you.
I wanted to just share from the perspective of Singapore because the Ministry of Health, they are moving into what we call the Healthier SG. And that's in a way because, as I was earlier mentioning, Singapore is going to be a super aged society. So in the next 5 years, because now it's 2023, around 2030, we have about 1 in every 4 will be age 65 and above. So the ministry is actually very, very concerned about this. And the question actually asked is quite relevant because in the context of residential care, it's probably at the tail end. So there's emphasis towards preventative, and that's what are the works we can do in the community. In Singapore, I think there is a perspective of trying to develop what we call an active aging center, and they want to provide this accessible to the seniors out in the community. So they are trying to look into the opportunities and the barriers and seeing how we can provide tailored programs to help the seniors to age in place. I think one thing we can take this home is the beauty of exercises has to be specific, tailored. As much as a lot of us would like to encourage and promote physical activities, this is one of the basic advice I will give, and that's what I also have taken off. But more importantly, if you're looking at falls and probably in other aspects perhaps to try to build on resilience, I think some of the targeted and specific exercises are actually quite useful. That helps to be targeted on what are we trying to help the seniors to be focused on. So I think in the constructs of say finance, like you talk about stock market, you want to know what are the different equities or the bonds that you want to focus on. And exercises, as much as you're promoting physical activities, I think there are those that we're focusing on strength and balance, agility, power, flexibility. I think those are very relevant to help to have the seniors age in place.
Is this working? No, that's good. I thought it might. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I agree, and it is a very good question. And see, what was happening with the Sunbeam trial is that we were trying to fix the fact that we hadn't addressed prevention. And the World Health Organization published something in 2015 that mentioned that we are now living in the first generation of human beings who have to intentionally exercise because technology, transport, etc., lifestyle, urbanisation, and the convenience of being able to jump in a car or jump on a bus, right, as opposed to walking here or there, even having a freezer so you don't have to go out every day to pick up your groceries. You can go out once a week and stay home for the whole week. What we've accidentally done is developed sedentary lifestyle. And so I think that the people that I was including in the Sunbeam trial were a really good example of what happens if you don't exercise for the last couple of decades very much. And so that whole healthy ageing strategy that we've been talking about today, and I think Australia is also embracing that idea as Singapore is, and that we have to think ahead and exercise more in the younger decades. I mean, it's hard enough, I know myself, and I'm a proponent of exercise in case you missed it. When Christmas comes around and I stop going to my regular exercise and I start enjoying time with my family and friends, I find it really hard to motivate myself to get back into the routine too. So motivation is a massive factor. But the things that seem to help with adherence and motivation is the social component and group exercise and things that are fun. So I call it exercise in disguise. And so while that means we do have to try and find a way to give people an individualised dose, it's on the the clinicians to make sure that they don't just write an academically perfect paper, but they find out what is going to stimulate this person to actually want to come. So some things that I've seen work is doing the initial assessment and the exercise prescription, and then part of that prescription is the clinician has to have a think about and a talk to the person about what are the sort of things you like to do. So I've had men's groups, for example, where it's secret men's business, and they go and they're doing their exercise, but they've got their own playlist. They've got a focus that perhaps there might be it'll be different in different cultures, I recognise, but if, for example, they're all football fans, then their balance exercises might come down to throwing football around to each other. So it's making it social and fun as well. And I can say for sure that motivation was hard with this lot too, that were in the Sunbeam trial. And the reason that they kept coming was because they found it was fun. It was nothing to do with the scientific prescription of exercise. It was all about making it fun. So I think my answer is prevention now. We've got that opportunity that we're promoting exercise across the life course. We've really got to get on that. And then whatever we're doing at any age, it has to be fun.
Look, I'm just going to add also from a personal view, because I'm in a situation with my mum. She's ageing at home. She has advanced dementia and advanced Alzheimer's and relies on the nurses, and I'm living in Australia trying to make her care better. Because I think ageing at home is the most important thing, and we'll do anything to keep mum at home because that's where she knows where she is. And I'm sort of in a dilemma because I know what I'd like to do, and what I like about Sunbeam is the fact that there is the home care program as well. So you can do all the exercises at home. In case of mum, she gets, the government takes her to an activity group once a week. So there's a taxi that comes, goes around Helsinki and picks up all the older people. I wish I could change what they do when they go to the activity group. Everything is chair-based exercises, even like in the case of mum who's very physical. It's a 2-story house and she goes up and down the stairs. She used to have a chair on the stairs. Thankfully it's broken and we can't fix it. We can't fix it. Well, my brother's an engineer and thankfully can't fix it. So mum has to walk. But I think it's a lot of time it is the culture. Look, we can't change rush. We can't change funding. There's some things we can't rush, but even like getting people dressed, don't just help them. Ask them to get dressed themselves and if we could change a culture where people are more active, because being passive, like even reaching out for cups, if an OT goes home, don't take the cup, asking the older person to bring the cup. So they have to do the exercise without realising that they're doing the exercises. And I think the culture is horrible, and I'm more thinking like if we compare us to the previous generations, think about our children, because they are at home with their iPads. I challenged someone at a conference about this when they said something, conversation. I was like, well, we lecture kids. They don't know how to do basic motor tasks. They don't know how to skip rope. In Australia, they don't have swings anymore in schools because you might fall off and break an arm. You can't climb trees because you might fall off. You can't do skip ropes and horrible. And all the fact they don't even go playing with their friends. They go outside and they loiter on their phones in a bad posture with an overuse syndrome in their thumbs. Good luck for those guys. So who's going to look after us when we're really old? When they have zero balance, they have zero social skills, and they have no motor control. I mean, I really fear for the next generation who has no idea about play. And look, I think it's, I think funding is a problem, but I think if we could create a culture and also I think just really making people understand the value of it, like really preventing it, like trying to make people understand the value of good food and exercise. We have some residential, the retirement villages that are tremendous, where they've invested in the gym and more than 90% of the people use the gym. But we have a lot of places where they have the gym and even the physios won't use it. They'll go I'm not going to say any place names, but a physio has looked at me and said, well, it's functional, is it now? I was like, well, you can't do functional unless you get some strength. So I think the culture is a big thing, and the motivation, and often people, I think there's a lot of successful research projects where there's cake involved. And I think cake is great. Have the cake after cake is full of protein. Put some extra dairy there and extra milks, and it's good protein. I mean, put a bit less butter. But I think if we can create a culture and create a system where, and having also students using, like you use students, and we have some sites where they use the students. One of our clients in Resicare was a palliative care dementia site, and the physio said to the students, well, if you get that person in, you'll get an A. A student will do anything to get an A. A student will bend over backwards and do the cartwheels around the room to get an A. So using the student power, and I think it is hard, but I strongly believe in aging at home, and I hope I can be there. That's why I go mad with the gym, and I try to do what I ask people to do, because I know I'm going to be there. I have horrible genes, what cause under chronic diseases, so they're lurking around the corner. They'll come eventually. But I think culture is really big, and I think supporting aging at home and trying to teach, even I'm trying to teach my mum's nurses, well, while you're helping her to get dressed, make her stand up and do the stuff, and while you're cooking, do the 10 sit-to stands. You're in the kitchen anyway. Okay, the food is too hot. You need to wait for it to cool down. Do 10 sit-to stands together. It's going to be good exercise for you as well. Not everybody. So implementing it into ADL, like really everyday life, and then it's by accident. And people don't realize it's the same as brushing the teeth, standing on one foot while brushing the teeth. Or I think if we got creative, we could do a lot more at home. Yes.
Just quick add on. I have a colleague who was actually doing a lot of research in healthcare, and he was doing actually exergaming. And what we found is that when the patients or the participants show improvement, they are more motivated to come back. So they would actually travel 45 minutes to SG and Able Village, and then another 45 minutes home. And that's awesome.
It's like Jenny's slide, 254% improvement.
That's what I was going to say. Success is motivating. I always teach students that it's better to have somebody successful on their first day or first few visits to any exercise program than it is to make it academically perfect. Because if the person can do it and they go home feeling proud, then we've got them. And then we can start from then on improving dosage and making.
And I guess part of it, because I have had one mom and one dad who had both Parkinson, dementia and all that. Generally for Singapore, and I could be making a general statement, is that when someone is frail, the first instinct is go get a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Because then that minimizes the fall. I mean, that's something that's going to be very hard to change.
And I think that's been something that's really concerned me over the years, is that sometimes because we're in a risk-averse generation now, where you have to, cover yourself against people falling over, the risk is that you can really make your falls rates look amazing if you keep everybody in a wheelchair.
But once a person is in a wheelchair, they're
not
probably
going back.
never ever going to walk.
We have, not without really focused rehabilitation, but that's right. So there's multiple levels, isn't there, to addressing it. One is make the exercise something they want to do, make them feel successful and proud. Match them exercise in disguise, I like to call it. I put gardening beds through one of the villages, and I made them all just a bit too high off the ground, so that if you wanted to do any gardening you had to stand up. And then I put everything slightly out of reach so that you had to balance for it. And you can do a bit of clever planning in it to get people to do exercise, even if they don't like structured exercise programs. I think probably. Is there anyone else who's got something for us?
My name is Joshua. I am a trained physical therapist from Argo.
Hello.
Yeah. Like you say, falls are not well reflected in aged care because most of the time you put them on a chair. So how do you overcome the care culture in Australia? Because in Singapore, our care culture is all about no walking equals less falls, equals less incident reports. Yeah, so we in aged care have a huge mountain to climb, because a lot of our care staff, well, namely, I'm not too sure if there's any nurses here, falls is a no-no. So because of that, we tend to restrain our residents. Yeah,
And
so
that,
how do you
that's
overcome
not
it?
unique to Singapore. Australia had this big Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety, which came about because there was complaints from residents and their families about the drop in quality of life when people moved into a home that forced them to live by a certain set of rules in order to cover the back of the home, rather than prioritising their quality of life. It's become a bit easier because there's now a sort of federal top-level government ban on restrictive practices. I'll just get my eyes out of it. On what they call restrictive practices, which includes writing up a care plan that says you can't walk when you can. It includes physical restraints, putting a seatbelt on if somebody's in a wheelchair, that kind of, even putting a table across the front so that they don't stand up. These are all chemical restraints, giving somebody something to calm them down so that their behaviours are better managed. They're all banned in Australia now, so that came from the government. I think if you don't have that, it is definitely more difficult, but it involves an entire culture shift. There's no point in us going, okay, we're going to get everybody to come to the gym now and do some strength and balance training, and then when they go back, doesn't matter how much they've improved, they're not allowed to walk anyway. So I think that has to be, it'll have to involve work from the top down, so talking to the people making the rules, and then education from the bottom up, so that everybody, falls are everybody's business. So that means whether you are maintenance, kitchen staff, whoever you are, not just the nursing staff, everybody needs to be on board in supporting people to become more independent. So that takes a fair bit of work from education and human resourcing side, as well as what the clinicians are doing. Thank you, it's a really good point.
I was hoping Gerald was around still.
Have you left?
I think he left, so that would be a bummer.
I think we're recording this. You can hear that. You can hear that answer.
I think the policy makers.
We'll send him the tape.
Anything else? Anyone else? Yes.
Hi. I just wanted to know about the sustainability of your program, because you've done it in
Just hold on a moment, I'll just
I'll
pass you the
repeat.
mic
I
so
can
that
repeat it. It's all right.
Can I borrow the mic so that they can hear what the question is? Yeah.
more on the sustainability of your program.
Yes.
Because you've done it in 16 centres, right? You've recruited across 16 centres. So what's next after this? Are they still being sustained in all the centres?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So the study finished in the clinical part of it finished in 2016 or 2017 was the last, the 12-month follow-up measures. So that trial included 6 months of training using the gym, and then a 6-month maintenance program afterwards. So that meant that they actually mucked up the trial if they kept doing the same, if they kept doing the progressive. So that trial was asking the question, does a progressive resistance and balance training improve falls? And then after their 12 months was up, a number of the centres approached me and said, we want the gym back now. Like, our 12 months just finished, can we have the gym back now? And so then they went ahead and built or installed gymnasiums in their centres. So that was for those aged care providers. But then since then, so we're now about 7 years post the study. There's been a whole lot of, because of the study, there's been a whole lot of new centres who've said, okay, well, I think this looks great for our centre if we put in a gymnasium. And we tell the world that we are a place that is going to support people getting back on their feet. And we're going to work actively for falls prevention. So it turned out in a number of aged care centres in Australia to give them a marketing edge. And they'd bring people walking through on their tours, people, and especially their children who are sort of in their 50s and 60s. They're going, I'm going to put mum in a place where she's going to get back on her feet. And so that and then everybody in those centres, the culture in those centres is that's how we roll. This is how we do it in our place. And so there is quite a shift. There has been quite a shift. But then in the since October 1st, 2022, the government now finally, because that took me, they were still only funding passive treatments, but that changed on the 1st of October last year. So now a version of this program is being run out in most aged care villages across Australia.
But your program is for 6 months, right, in training?
Yeah.
So what happens after the 6 months and the 6
So
months?
in the trial, what we did was they did progressive resistance training for 6 months, and then they did a maintenance program which was using ankle weights and resistance bands for 6 months. And we found the best reduction in falls rate was at the end of the 6 months with the gym equipment, but they did maintain it over the next 6 months as well. Then that was to prove, does exercise help? It wasn't actually, that was what that trial was for. In the real world now, people attend and the physio drops in once a fortnight and progresses them forevermore, and they stay walking and being active and participating in activities with their family until they decide either their health declines and they can't come anymore or they pass away. So what's happening is that it just keeps going. And you can actually, I can't imagine now just telling people they need to stop coming to the gym at 6 months and do the resistance bands. They just stay doing the resistance training. It becomes part of their life. Yeah. But that's not what the trial was about. The trial was just can we have an effect? Yeah, thank you. It's a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned it, because a lot of people think, well, why don't we just lease the equipment for 6 months then and send it back? And of course, every new resident that comes in misses out, and that's not the real world application. Thank you.